Learn English through story. The Last Harvest. In a small, secluded village nestled between towering mountains, there lived an old farmer named Elias. The village, though remote, was known for its fertile land and abundant harvests, thanks to the river that flowed down from the mountains, bringing fresh water to the crops. Elias had spent his entire life tending to the land, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather. His fields were always the most bountiful, his crops the most vibrant, and the villagers often sought his advice on farming. But Elias's success was not just due to his knowledge and hard work. There was a secret that had been passed down through his family for generations: a small pouch of enchanted seeds. These seeds had been gifted to his ancestors by a wandering sage who had once saved the village from a terrible drought. The seeds had the power to ensure a bountiful harvest, no matter the weather or the condition of the soil. However, the seeds were finite, and they could only be used sparingly, for their magic was delicate and not to be wasted. Elias had always been careful with the seeds, using them only when absolutely necessary and sharing their bounty with the village. Over the years, the villagers had come to depend on Elias's fields for their sustenance, and they trusted him implicitly. But as Elias grew older, he began to worry about the future. He had no children to pass the secret on to, no one to continue the legacy of his family. The thought of the village struggling without the enchanted seeds weighed heavily on his heart. One autumn, when the leaves had turned golden and the air was crisp with the promise of winter, a stranger arrived in the village. He was a tall, imposing man with dark, piercing eyes and a smooth, silver tongue. He introduced himself as Malak, a trader from a distant land, and he claimed to have goods and treasures that could bring great wealth to the village. The villagers were intrigued by Malak's offerings of fine silks, rare spices, and precious gems. But what caught their attention most was his promise of a miracle. Malak claimed to have a potion that could make the land even more fertile, ensuring that the crops would grow bigger and faster than ever before. The villagers, always eager for a better life, were tempted by his words. Elias, however, was wary. He had seen men like Malak before, real smooth talkers who promised the world but delivered nothing. He warned the villagers not to trust the stranger, reminding them that the land had always provided for them, and that greed could lead to ruin. But the villagers, caught up in Malak's promises, dismissed Elias's concerns as the fears of an old man. Malak, sensing Elias's influence over the villagers, sought to undermine him. He began to spread rumors, whispering that Elias was holding back the village's potential by refusing to use the enchanted seeds more often. "Why should you settle for just enough when you could have more?" he would say. "Why should you trust an old man who clings to the past when the future is within your grasp?" The seeds of doubt took root in the villagers' minds, and soon they began to question Elias's wisdom. They accused him of being selfish, of hoarding the seeds for himself. They demanded that he use them more freely, to ensure that the village would prosper beyond its wildest dreams. Elias tried to explain that the seeds were not to be used recklessly, that their magic was fragile and could be lost if abused, but the villagers would not listen. Finally, in an effort to placate the villagers and to prove his loyalty to the village, Elias agreed to use the enchanted seeds for one last harvest. He warned the villagers that this would be the final time the seeds could be used, and that they should be prepared to return to their traditional farming methods afterward. The villagers, eager for the promised bounty, ignored his warnings and rejoiced at the news. Elias sowed the seeds carefully, just as his ancestors had taught him, and soon the fields were filled with crops that were larger and more vibrant than ever before. The villagers were amazed at the sight, and they celebrated their impending prosperity with feasts and festivals. Malakr, pleased with the outcome, offered to buy the harvest for a hefty sum, promising to take the village's name far and wide as the source of the finest produce in the land. But as the weeks passed, Elias noticed something troubling. The crops, though plentiful, were growing too fast. The leaves were unnaturally green, the fruit unnaturally large, and the roots were spreading far beyond their normal range. The land seemed to be straining under the weight of the crops, and the river, which had always flowed steadily, began to dry up. The villagers, blinded by their greed and the sight of their bountiful fields, paid no attention to Elias's concerns. One morning, as Elias was inspecting his fields, he noticed that the soil had begun to crack and crumble. The once rich earth was turning to dust, and the roots of the crops were shriveling and dying. The enchanted seeds, it seemed, had drained the land of its life, leaving it barren and lifeless. Elias knew then that the village was in grave danger. He rushed to the village square, where the villagers were preparing for another celebration. "The land is dying," he cried, his voice filled with desperation. "The seeds have taken all they can from the earth, and now there is nothing left. We must stop this before it is too late." But the villagers, still caught up in their excitement, laughed at Elias's warning. They had grown accustomed to the sight of their flourishing fields and could not believe that anything could go wrong. Malakr, seeing an opportunity, stepped forward and accused Elias of trying to sabotage the village's success out of jealousy. "Why should we listen to this old man?" Malakr sneered. "He has nothing to offer but fear and doubt. The land is fine. Look at the crops. They are the best we have ever seen. Elias is just afraid of change, afraid of progress." The villagers, emboldened by Malakr's words, turned on Elias, accusing him of trying to hold them back. They ignored his pleas and continued with their celebrations, confident that their newfound prosperity would last forever. That night, a terrible storm rolled in. The skies darkened, and the winds howled through the village, tearing at the crops and the trees. The rain fell in torrents, flooding the fields and washing away the topsoil. The river, already weakened by the strain of the overgrown crops, burst its banks and swept through the village, destroying homes and livelihoods in its path. By morning, the village lay in ruins. The once fertile fields were nothing but a wasteland of mud and debris. The crops, which had promised so much, were gone, and the land was barren and lifeless. The villagers, shocked and dismayed, wandered through the wreckage, unable to comprehend the devastation. Elias, heartbroken by the destruction, tried to help where he could. He knew that the land would take years to recover, if it ever did. The enchanted seeds, which had once brought life to the village, were now gone forever, their magic spent. The villagers, realizing too late the consequences of their greed, turned to Elias for guidance, but there was little he could do. The damage had been done. As for Malakr, he disappeared into the storm, taking with him whatever treasures he could carry. The villagers never saw him again, and they were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives on their own. In the years that followed, the village slowly began to recover. The villagers, humbled by their experience, returned to their traditional farming methods, learning to work with the land rather than against it. They rebuilt their homes and their lives, but the memory of that terrible night stayed with them, a constant reminder of the dangers of greed and the importance of respecting the natural balance of the world. Elias continued to farm, though his fields were never as bountiful as they once were. He grew old and weary, but he found solace in the knowledge that he had done his best to protect the village, even if they had not listened. Before he died, he passed on the lessons of the enchanted seeds to a new generation, hoping that they would learn from the mistakes of the past. And so, the village of Embrus endured, its people wiser and more humble than before. They never forgot the lesson of the last harvested, that true prosperity comes not from taking more than the land can give, but from living in harmony with the world around them. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoyed, then please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.